A stark truth looms over global economics and politics. Why is America willing to launch costly wars for oil? The answer lies not just in controlling energy resources, but at its core, protecting an empire called the petrodollar system. Imagine, if you want to buy oil from wealthy Middle Eastern nations, no matter who you are, you must own U.S. dollars. This is the ultimate weapon, helping the greenback maintain its monopoly and never die in the international market. By binding the planet's most vital commodity, oil, to its currency, America created a perfect trap. As long as the world thirsts for oil to run economies, nations must frantically hoard and pay tribute to the U.S. dollar. Any country or power daring to challenge this rule, seeking to replace the U.S. dollar in oil transactions, faces terrifying military might from Washington, because the blood flowing through the veins of the U.S. financial system is oil denominated in U.S. dollars. It is this very powerful operational mechanism that has turned America's currency into an unshakable force, as every nation in the world inadvertently becomes a debtor or a laborer for their financial system. When a country wants to develop its industry, they need oil. To get oil, they are forced to export real goods and real resources to the U.S. in exchange for green paper bills, and then use those exact dollars to buy energy from the Middle East. Even more frightening, after selling oil and earning a massive mountain of dollars, the Arab nations do not keep them in safes. Rather, by secret agreement, they are required to reinvest that money back into the United States by purchasing government bonds or acquiring state-of-the-art weapon arsenals. This closed cycle creates a perpetual financial flow, allowing Washington to freely print money to spend, fund its colossal war machines, and maintain a luxurious standard of living without fear of being drowned by inflation, because the entire world has already shouldered the risk for them. Therefore, any spark of an idea to break this order, whether it was Saddam Hussein wanting to sell oil in euros or Muammar Gaddafi wanting to replace it with the gold dinar, was ruthlessly and swiftly crushed, proving that the United States is willing to do anything, including toppling regimes and igniting bloody wars, just to protect the core survival of the petrodollar. However, the wheels of history are witnessing unprecedentedly massive cracks in this monopoly empire as the world enters a multipolar era. The global geopolitical map is being redrawn as the BRICS alliance expands and powers like China, Russia, or India aggressively push the de-dollarization trend, directly trading energy in yuan or each other's local currencies. Even Saudi Arabia, the core ally that helped the U.S. lay the foundation for the petrodollar in the 1970s, is no longer keen on exclusive USD payments, remaining ready to open doors to other currencies to protect itself from Western economic sanctions. The shaking of the petrodollar means the U.S. is losing its ability to export inflation to the world and can no longer print infinite money at will like before. Now, as the world simultaneously seeks green energy alternatives to oil and builds independent financial systems, Washington's ultimate weapon faces its greatest existential trial in history. The question at this point is no longer whether the U.S. is ready to launch another war, but whether their military might is still enough of a deterrent to salvage a petrodollar system gradually entering its twilight when nations have begun to wake up and find a way out of the greenback's containment. The inevitable consequence of this shift is a comprehensive reshaping of the global economic order, where the rules of the game are no longer dictated by the United States alone, as central banks worldwide aggressively slash their greenback reserve ratios to pivot toward physical gold and other strong local currencies. The purchasing power of the USD is beginning to face severe downward pressure. America must now confront a harsh reality. Trillions of dollars once hoarded by nations to buy oil now risk fleeing and returning to knock on the door of the domestic economy, triggering unprecedented waves of inflation right on the other side of the ocean. To save itself, Washington has no choice but to alter its strategy, shifting from forced hegemony to a fierce competition for survival in the era of new technology and energy. The battle to defend the petrodollar is no longer fought solely with bombs or aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf, but has escalated into a war over digital currencies, control of semiconductor supply chains, and rare earth mineral mines for electric vehicles. Although the American monetary empire will not collapse entirely overnight, the era in which the world had to bow and tribute to the dollar in exchange for every drop of oil has officially come to an end, opening a volatile yet fairer new chapter for global finance. In this context, the emerging economies in Southeast Asia are facing a highly challenging strategic puzzle, yet one filled with opportunities. No longer entirely bound to a single currency, These nations can be more proactive in diversifying their foreign exchange reserves, confidently settling major energy contracts through local currency swap mechanisms to minimize exchange rate risks. These flexible moves serve not only as a shield protecting the domestic economy against financial shocks from the West, but also contribute to accelerating integration into a multipolar trading system, where the flow of goods and energy is priced based on actual demand rather than the power of a money-printing machine. Concluding a half-century era manipulated by the petrodollar, the world is turning to a new page, challenging yet opening up a more equitable development space for all nations. Our breaking news on this historic shift concludes here. Thank you for your time and attention. However, the end of this era is precisely the beginning of a fierce new race, where no country can afford to be complacent if they do not want to be left behind. Although the petrodollar may be weakening, the United States will certainly not easily surrender its hegemony without deploying strategic countercards, ranging from digitizing its currency to establishing more exclusive new-style economic alliances. International financial experts warn that the transition period between the old and new orders is always the most volatile and vulnerable time, when covert currency wars could erupt at any moment and wipe out the economic achievements of unprepared nations. Therefore, closely monitoring every fluctuation in capital flows, shifts in major central banks' policies, and global energy agreements will be the vital key for every investor and policymaker during this pivotal phase. We will continue to update the latest developments and in-depth analyses of this monetary war for the throne in our upcoming bulletins. Looking at the broader picture, this power struggle will ultimately reshape the lives of every ordinary citizen across the planet, from the price of a liter of gas at the pump to the cost of imported daily necessities. A financial system no longer dominated by a single monopoly means that nations will have to stand on their own 2 feet, using true economic strength, labor productivity, and the core value of goods, rather than relying on the privileges of infinite money printing. This awakening is forcing the entire world to rethink the concept of national security, where energy security, food security, and financial security must be tightly interwoven to create a solid armor against any geopolitical storms. As the final chapters of the book titled Petrodollar are gradually closing, history will record this moment as a great turning point, a milestone marking the painful yet inevitable transition of humanity toward a world order that is freer, more balanced, and more diverse than ever before. Standing at the threshold of this new chapter, the future of the global energy map is now being decided by the intersection of currency and disruptive technology. As Middle Eastern nations are no longer keen on absolute loyalty to the greenback, they are shifting their massive capital flows toward acquiring green technologies, building smart megacities, and investing in renewable energy systems from hydrogen to solar power. This epochal shift proves that the ultimate power backing a currency in the future will no longer lie underground in oil fields, but in each nation's ability to master technology and knowledge. The essence of tribute in the new century will no longer be hoarding paper bills with no real value, but the race to gain control over global technological standards and digital resources. This covert grand war will surely drag on with unpredictable developments, reflecting an eternal truth of history. No empire is immortal, and the ultimate survivor is always the one that knows how to reinvent itself to adapt to the flow of the times. That great shifting journey is also a stark warning to those who are still resting on the laurels of old values. As the boundary between physical money and digital assets gradually blurs, wise nations have begun shifting toward building financial sovereignty based on highly secure algorithms, decentralized payment systems, and currency baskets backed by the core resources of the new era like electricity, nuclear energy, and green energy. The gradual collapse of a system based on military coercion and fossil energy monopoly like the petrodollar is the most costly lesson about the complacency of a superpower. The world of tomorrow will have no room for unilateral manipulation, where a single nation can push its crisis onto the rest of humanity with just a money-printing order. We are living in historic moments, witnessing with our own eyes the greatest transfer of power of the century, where the flow of prosperity is finding its own way back to nations that cherish true value, respect multilateral rules of the game, and constantly innovate to master their own destiny. It is the rise of these tangible values that is turning the currency war into a fairer and more transparent playing field, where a nation's strength is measured by actual productive capacity rather than the number of aircraft carriers stationed off distant shores. New alliances, ranging from Eurasian energy cooperation axes to cross-border digital payment networks independent of the Western-controlled SWIFT system, are mushrooming, forming a solid defense network for emerging economies. The U.S. will certainly not sit idly by and watch its privilege dissolve, and the world will likely witness more fierce sanctions, intense trade wars, or even proxy conflicts to delay the demise of the petrodollar. But once the Pandora's box of autonomy has been opened, when nations have tasted the sense of freedom unconstrained by the USD, no power can reverse the wheel of history. The global economic order is transforming from a fragile, monolithic ecosystem into a biodiverse forest, where every currency, every culture, and every mode of development has an equal right to survive and thrive, completely closing the bloody and oil-stained historical chapter of the last century to open an era of genuine autonomy and balance. Looking ahead, the collapse of an old order does not mean the world will fall into anarchic chaos, but rather the shaping of a smarter and more flexible global governance mechanism. In this new era, trust, which is inherently the foundation of any monetary system, will no longer be backed by empty promises or military muscle, but digitized and verified by the transparency of blockchain technology and smart contracts. The ability of nations to directly exchange goods, services, and energy through an open financial ecosystem, free from third-party control, will completely eliminate the power to freeze assets or impose unilateral sanctions that have been Washington's familiar weapons. This is the inevitable end for a system built on asymmetric power, paving the way for a circular, sustainable global economy tied to the shared destiny of humanity. The flow of history has chosen a new direction, and what we are witnessing today are only the first steps of a great journey toward a world where prosperity is shared equally among those who deserve it, closing forever the historical chapter of the petrodollar monopoly. This irreversible shift is also plunging multinational corporations and formidable financial institutions into an unprecedented grand reshuffle in history. Energy giants that once dominated thanks to petrodollar flows are now forced to undergo comprehensive restructuring, pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into building infrastructure for a decentralized and carbon-neutral economy, as money flows are no longer compelled to pass through New York or London banks for oil settlements. The map of global financial centers is also shifting dramatically toward the Asia-Pacific region and the Middle East, where next-generation energy and digital asset exchanges are booming. The emergence of a multipolar financial system not only frees developing nations from the great shadow of the greenback, but also stimulates a global wave of innovation, as financial resources, instead of being burned on arms races to protect oil, are now redirected toward solving humanity's greatest challenges, such as climate change, food security, and sustainable development. This new order may not be perfect and still harbors new conflicts of interest, but it will certainly end the era where a single nation has the power to dictate the prosperity or demise of the rest of the world, officially ushering in a new dawn, the era of a truly multipolar, autonomous, and flatly connected global economy. This financial cataclysm is also breathing new life into the financial management mindset of every enterprise and the accumulation mindset of every individual across the planet. When currency is no longer a tool for geopolitical manipulation, people begin to witness the rise of assets with true intrinsic value and high liquidity in the digital world, forcing investors to break away from the ruts of traditional thinking to seek security in a maximally diversified portfolio. From sovereign wealth funds to ordinary citizens, the trend of shifting from holding paper debt commitments to owning tangible resources like rare earths, high-tech food, and clean energy is becoming an unstoppable wave. The demise of the petrodollar is a profound reminder that all privileges built on injustice and imposition have an expiration date, and the world is entering a freer new chapter where no single nation can use its currency as a hostage for the development of other peoples. As the velvet curtain of the old era officially falls, humanity is not in dismay, but, on the contrary, is full of confidence, preparing for an opening chapter of shared prosperity, where the flow of freedom, fairness, and financial autonomy will shape a sustainable future for generations to come. Ultimately, when looking back at the entire history of the petrodollar system, we realize that every monetary empire, no matter how powerful, must obey the natural law of rise and fall. From the Roman denarius, the Dutch guilder, the British pound of the last century to the US dollar of today, no supreme power can last forever if it detaches itself from real value and the common consensus of humanity. The great shift we are fortunate to witness is not merely the collapse of a currency, but the inevitable evolution of human civilization toward a fairer social form, where power is no longer concentrated in the hands of a single manipulator, The gunfire and smoke of past oil wars are gradually fading away, making way for the keyboard clicks of tech engineers, the rotation of wind turbines, and respectful multilateral cooperation handshakes. A new chapter of world history has officially opened, a chapter in which prosperity is defined by peace, autonomy, and the shared desire for development among all nations on this planet. And in this promising new chapter, our generation stands as historical witnesses at the very epicenter of a grand transition. Today's tumultuous upheavals are not signs of decline, but the inevitable birth pangs giving rise to a global financial system that is more resilient, transparent, and humane. As the specter of monopoly and oil wars gradually fades into the past, humanity is together laying the first bricks for a sharing economy, where the flow of prosperity is no longer blocked by geopolitical borders or unilateral sanctions. This is the time for nations, big or small, to proudly hold their heads high, mastering their own monetary destiny and resources, while moving together toward a green, sustainable, and absolutely fair future. The epic saga of a rising multipolar world has resounded, permanently closing the era of petrodollar dominance and opening a bright, prosperous new page of history for all humankind on this planet. That new chapter is no longer a distant vision, but is being realized through each powerful impulse of today's global economy. As the final barriers of monopoly are dismantled, a wave of free and autonomous economic integration is booming across continents, creating unprecedentedly dynamic trade corridors where nations freely establish rules based on respect and mutual benefit, no longer pressured to hoard massive foreign exchange reserves in a easily weaponized currency. Humanity's financial resources are now unleashed to focus on ultimate goals, elevating the quality of life, narrowing the wealth gap, and protecting our shared home, Earth. This grand transformation is a resounding affirmation that true power does not belong to those who own the money printing press or the gun barrels guarding oil wells, but to nations that unite, innovate, and resiliently determine their own future. Fully closing a half-century of ups and downs for the petrodollar empire, humanity is firmly walking under the dawn of a new era, an era of peace, financial autonomy, and eternal prosperity for generations to come. The dawn of this new era also illuminates a reality that financial autonomy is not merely an economic goal, but has become the core foundation for the independence and sovereignty of every nation in the new century. When no power can any longer use money as the ultimate tool to dictate the fate of other peoples, the world will witness the blossoming of cultural colors and diverse economic development models, deeply imbued with the unique identity of each territory. New sources of energy unleashed, smart financial systems operated by artificial intelligence and future technology will no longer serve the local interests of a minority group, but become a common asset driving the monumental progress of all humanity. The closure of the petrodollar era is not a period, but a comma opening up a vast space for survival, where every nation has the opportunity to become an independent pole of prosperity, together weaving a panoramic world picture of peace, fairness, and sustainable development for generations to come.